Yeah, I'd say, and it's about to get a lot worse. Ian, welcome to the program.
Yeah, no, in case you've wondered what the Gilded Age looks like, we're about to all find out.
You know, it's funny that you say that because I pre-recorded an interview with Jane McAlevey that I'm going to play right after you, where she wrote a book specifically on, and I was talking to her about the implications of the Janus ruling, and the name of her book is, dealing with the new Gilded Age, anticipating what we're seeing today. So, all right, we had some major rulings this week that are now almost secondary in the sense that they were very bad rulings. If we look back on Anthony Kennedy's year, in addition to these rulings, stuff that people anticipated he was sort of waiting for in terms of the gerrymandering, the court punted. And let me just get your take on what do you think that's about now that you know he's retiring?
Right. Yeah, I think when you look back at this past term, it's clear that he made the decision to retire at some point this year. And he just didn't want to hand down decisions that he knew were going to be overruled 5 minutes after he left. And so, he punted on the big gerrymandering cases. He punted on the case dealing with whether or not you can discriminate against people if your religion tells you to. And then, I think the craziest decision he made was in the Muslim ban case. He joined Chief Justice Roberts' opinion, which more or less says, so long as the president can come up with a legitimate sounding reason why he wants to do this, we won't look at all the past racist statements he said in the past, explaining that he's doing it for some other reason. Kennedy joined that opinion, and then he wrote a separate concurrence where he basically said, yeah, no, this is really bad, and the president shouldn't do this, but I'm kind of powerless to do anything about it, so we're just going to let it happen. So, looking back on it, he looks like a man who, spent his last term on the court in a senior slump and, who didn't want to fight any big fights and who didn't want to get himself into a position where he was just going to hand down a decision that wasn't going to last very long. And so this term, the sort of decisions you got from the court this term look a whole lot like the sort of decisions that you would have gotten if Kennedy had already been replaced in many cases.
I gotta say it's funny because for as long as I've talked to people about the Supreme Court, Kennedy was always slightly, I guess, an enigma. And I gotta say, the guy has really revealed himself. I mean, I don't think history is going to be very kind to this guy who sort of backs out in a very sniveling fashion. Because who knows whether or not these things would have been overturned. But the idea that he didn't want to leave his mark on the court in any fashion is sort of shocking to me.
Yeah, history is not going to look well on this guy. Here's the thing about Anthony Kennedy. Justice Kennedy is really, really conservative. People would appeal to him because he was our best shot of getting one of the conservatives to flip their vote. And advocates who, most of the people who know a lot about the Supreme Court are lawyers who advocate and who may have a case in front of the Supreme Court. And they're not going to talk badly about the guy who's their swing vote because, you don't want to piss him off. You need him. Most of his decisions were bad. He wrote Citizens United, for Christ's sake.
Right.
And I think that the way to understand his decision to retire now is one of two things were going to happen. Either he retires under Donald Trump, and if he retires under Donald Trump, then then all the gay rights decisions potentially go away, abortion goes away, all the stuff we think is good that he did, the stuff preserving civil rights laws, that goes away if he retires under Donald Trump. Or he could retire, wait and leave the court under, whoever the next president is, Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, whoever it is, he leaves under that person. And then Citizens United goes away. Then this union's decision goes away. Then all of the decisions saying that rich people get what they want in this country, those decisions go away. But he gets to keep, but we get to keep abortion. We get to keep gay rights. And what Kennedy says, you know what? I care more about rich people than I do about gay people and women.
It's enlightening and stunning and disgusting. All right. Well, I want to move a little bit from the sort of this first version of history about Kennedy, because he has now couldn't be less relevant, right? And the question is, well, there's a couple of questions, and let's start with order of sort of, I guess, what would happen in temporally. Is there any mechanism to deny Donald Trump this pick, at least until there's a chance in November that a new Senate would be elected? Now, and that's a long shot in and of itself, but is there any way to deny him this pick for this session of the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, it's called a floor vote. If there are 51 senators who don't want, or maybe even just 50, because McCain is still in Arizona, then, if two Republican senators decide that they don't want Donald Trump to replace Anthony Kennedy with whoever Trump picks, then, then this nomination is stopped. And as it turns out, there happened to be two Republican senators, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who at least claim to be pro-choice. And so the decision that Susan Collins needs to make, the decision that Lisa Murkowski needs to make, is they are going to vote on whether or not to overrule Roe v. Wade. I mean, that's what this vote is. I mean, it's about a lot of things. But one of the things that this vote is about is Susan Collins going to overrule Roe v. Wade? And Susan Collins can decide that she does not want to overrule Roe v. Wade, and Lisa Murkowski can decide that she does not want to overrule Roe v. Wade. And maybe after they make it clear to Trump that that's not happening, he'll pick someone else who's more moderate and can get more votes. But yeah, I mean, there is a mechanism to stop whoever Trump's nominee is from being confirmed. It's called a no vote in his confirmation.
Okay. And let me just remind folks about Susan Collins when it comes to these things. She voted for the health care repeal based upon a promise by Mitch McConnell that I think never materialized, and I never heard about Susan Collins ever having a problem with it again. So, Ian, I don't want to put you in a position where you have to bet anything of value, but I'm willing to make a wager out there for, let's say, I don't want to go overboard, but I'll do 50% of what I've saved for my kids' college education, that Susan Collins is going to say, like, we just don't know what this nominee is going, how they're going to vote. There's no way for it because they won't tell us.
Yeah. Susan Collins is counting on her voters. Susan Collins wants to think her voters are stupid. Susan Collins is the senator from a blue state. She is the senator from the state of Maine. And she is trusting on the ability that she is going to be able to lie to her voters. She's going to be able to say that she has no idea what this person's going to do. And she's going to rely on that when she runs for re-election in 2020. And if she tells her voters, "Oh, I don't know if this person's going to get rid of Roe or not," she is lying to them.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. She's a senator from a blue state, and if she wants to run her next election having voted to overrule Roe v. Wade, that she can run her next election having voted to overrule Roe v. Wade, because that's what she is voting for. And, I agree with you. Susan Collins is terrible. I don't have a high degree of confidence that she's going to do the right thing here.
But that's the choice she's facing.
Least,
all right.
Yeah, but that's,
so let's go down the line
whether
here.
To go into her next election like this.
Let's go.
What was that?
I want to move forward in time. to where Susan Collins behaves exactly true to form. She votes for this person with so I met with them in private, and I had a pretty good inkling that they're going to protect a woman's right to choose. And then January comes, the new the new state governments are elected. The new Supreme Court justice is seated, and Jeffrey Toobin says 18 months we'll have 20 states that have outlawed abortion in their states. One of those states will head up cases, if not multiple ones, will head up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will choose one. They will overturn Roe v. Wade. It becomes a state matter. Let me ask you this. Can then a Republican, if the Republicans control the Senate and the House at that point, can they write a bill that says it's illegal to cross state lines to get an abortion?
Probably no. Probably they couldn't write that bill because there's a constitutional right to travel. If you are a U.S. citizen, you are allowed to travel, across state borders. There are some laws saying that, prohibiting like transporting a minor across state borders for the purpose of engaging in sexual trafficking. But I think that they probably aren't going to keep people from Texas from going up to New York to get an abortion. What the world looks like once the day after Roe v. Wade is overruled, or after it's like boiled down to nothing, because they may not actually write the words Roe v. Wade is overruled. They'll just make the decision have no force whatsoever. But the day after that happens, once that happens, if you are rich, your life is exactly the same.
Right.
If you are rich, the only thing that changes for you is that if you need an abortion, you call up your boss and you say, hey, I need to take a few days off, and you buy a plane ticket and you go up to New York and you get your abortion there, or you go to California and you get your abortion there, rather than being able to get it in a location that's more convenient. If you are poor, those are the people who are impacted. And not just if you're poor, if you don't have the job flexibility, so that you can take those days off on the spur of the moment, so you can travel somewhere else to get an abortion. If you don't have the money that you can just shell out for not just the cost of the treatment, but the plane ticket and everything else, those are the people who will be targeted for this. Rich people, even if abortion were banned in all 50 states, rich people could still go to Canada. This is about the way we're going to treat women who aren't rich.
And in many respects, as we talk about these, the high profile facets of our lives that are going to change with a replacement for Justice Kennedy, someone had texted me last night, like, how bad is this going to get? And I said, I can answer that question if you tell me what color you are, how much you earn, and where you live, what state, right? I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. Those three factors will determine how your life is impacted. And so let's talk about other things that you anticipate we're going to see changed with a fifth justice who looks more like Gorsuch than Kennedy.
Yeah. So here's my biggest concern, and I'm going to disagree with you slightly about like obviously the people who are going to be hit most immediately and most clearly are going to be women, people of color, sexual minorities, and gender minorities. I mean, that's clear. But the biggest thing that concerns me about this is that not that Kennedy was great on voting rights, but Roberts is much, much worse. And Roberts is the new swing voter. And what you've seen in the states is an effort to use more and more aggressive state laws restricting the franchise. That's what voter ID laws are. That's what that North Carolina law was, that just combined a bunch of ways to make it harder for black people to vote. Without Kennedy, I am 90% sure that a law like that North Carolina law is going to be upheld. And what Republican states are going to start doing in the coming years is they're going to start experimenting. They're going to start passing more and more aggressive voter suppression laws. These laws are going to target racial minorities because most African Americans, for example, vote for Democrats. And so they can look at the color of someone's skin and say, if I disenfranchise this person, I'm pretty sure I'm disenfranchising a Democrat, and that'll help me get reelected. And so, all of us are in this together. If you start disenfranchising black voters,
I see what you're saying.
That means that Democrats no longer can win elections. And if you don't like the idea of living in a one-party nation, then this impacts you. I mean, I am white, and I also want to continue to have competitive elections. And that means that my fate is tied to the black people who are going to be targeted by these laws.
Right.